Good morning, everyone. Steve Etzel here, back with another video. This time the topic is base running ratings in baseball sims. This topic just came to me and I decided, what the heck, I'll put together a few slides and we'll have a quick discussion. So with that, let's move forward. So as always, appreciate comments on my videos. Like and subscribe is okay. One thing I wanted to mention is I have my email address here. Email me if you would be interested in getting a link to a Google Drive where I have now saved these PowerPoint presentations that relate to my videos. Someone asked me for that, and I did upload all the PowerPoints over the weekend. And I made that link available. I just need to have you email me so that I can share that drive. There are here a couple of links to other videos that may or may not be helpful on this particular subject that I'm going to talk about today. With that, base running ratings. In baseball sims, I much prefer that there be a separate base running and stolen base rating. I'm going to do a separate video on all my likes and dislikes about sims, but I like the ratings to be separate, and maybe more than that, I kind of prefer either the stolen base or the running rating be a letter, and then the other one be a number. There's a lot of sims where you see the base running ratings as something like 2/3, and you have to try to remember, which is which. Another observation I had is that a good stolen base rating probably implies a good running rating, but I don't think the converse is necessarily true. Maybe a guy like Pete Rose, reasonably fast, fairly aggressive, but doesn't steal a lot of bases, they would have a different rating, a lower stolen base rating, but a higher running rating. Base running is more than speed. It obviously includes speed, but I think there's intuition, and even the coaching influences, what kind of success the base runner would have in terms of advancing. Now, I tend to focus on numerical ratings when I'm doing base running ratings, but no metric is going to be perfect. A lot of metrics, as we'll see, use runs scored, but that could depend on the hitters that are behind you in the batting order. Interestingly, running metrics often include a stolen base factor, but as I said, you could have a fast runner or a good base runner who just doesn't happen to steal bases, and so the metric that includes stolen bases may penalize that type of runner. Triples is a factor that's often used in base running metrics, but those could be caused by more random factors than pure speed or base running capability. And then, I think there's the other risk that there's just some small sample size considerations. If you don't have a large sample size, then the metric may just be influenced by some randomness or this, some small situational factors. So those are just some thoughts to think about. There's one set of stats that is on Baseball Reference. I don't actually use this. Maybe this is a good time for me to say, if I'm rating players just for my own purposes, and it may be for some vintage sim, I will actually go to my stratomatic card viewer and just look up the person's rating and then convert it to whatever scale I'm working with in the particular sim. And I have a whole separate video on the Card Viewer app, so you can go find that. But in any event, Baseball Reference is what I use for almost all of my data sources when I'm working on sims. And in the advanced batting pages, there's a base running and miscellaneous stats table, which you can see here. Two specific stats that I'm looking at. One is run scoring percentage, which is runs excluding home runs, basically divided by times on base excluding home runs. And on the right, there's extra bases taken percentages, which seems to make even more sense as a metric. Basically, I think it's the number of times you take an extra base when the batter has hit a single or a double. And there may be some other qualification to that, but in any event, that's what that metric is. So I thought I'd do some little quick analysis of this. This happens to be Ricky Henderson's table that you see here. And so let's just take a look at Ricky Henderson here. The orange line is that statistic that we just talked about, the extra base taken percent. And I've started with 1985 here, and I'll explain why in a second. So this doesn't consider his first 6 seasons, but he had, I think, reasonably high statistics then as well. But you see the orange line is this extra bases taken percentage, and he was pretty high early in his career. It kind of settled down around 50% or between 50 and 60, which is pretty good. And then in the blue line is the runs scored percent. And you can see that statistic at the start of this was actually just under 50%. But early in his career, he was hovering above and below 40%. And then for the middle to late career, he was between 30 and 40%, which is still reasonably high. And then the bottom line, the green line, is his strat rating, which 17 is the fastest base running or the best base running rating you can have in strat. And he was a 17 essentially his whole career until 2000 when they dropped it to 15, which is still pretty fast. And then the last year they dropped it to 14. So that's Ricky Henderson. On the other end of the scale, we have Willie Starel. And one of my favorite players, but not necessarily known as a speedster. And this is another 19-year span, just like we had on the prior page. I wanted them to kind of line up. So I used 19 years of history for each of the two players. And so he started in 1963, and you can see his extra bases taken percentage. It jumped around a lot, but it was in the first couple of years was I think it was 44%, 63%. For some reason, it dropped down to 29% in 1965, but then it was back up again reasonably high through 1968 or so. Then it drops down into the 30 to 40% range, a lot lower than Henderson, who was above 50 a lot of years. In terms of his strat rating, he started out as an 11, moved up to a 12, then 1967 dropped to a 10, and then in 1969 they put him down to an 8, and he was there ever since. Whether that's accurate or not, I don't know. I do know that by 1972, if I'm not mistaken, he was playing pretty much full-time first base, whereas in 1971 and prior, he was a left fielder. So he must have had some amount of speed during that time, although, of course, he was known for his big bat. In terms of run scoring percentage, if you recall, Henderson was between 40 and 50%, around 40% early in his career, bounced between 30 and 40% in the middle of his career. Here we have Starel, who only exceeded 30% once in his career, which was 1973, which, if I recall, was a very good year for him and maybe should have been an MVP year. I think he might have had over 40 doubles and 40 home runs that year. I might be mistaken. But in any event, you can see that, there's some reasonable correlation with these two players between these two baseball reference metrics and their strat running rating. I think the one thing I would suggest if you were going to use these metrics is maybe use some kind of a rolling average, because I think in any given year there can be some inconsistencies, and this may be the small sample size issue that I talked about before. I haven't played with these two metrics so much so that I can't really say, but that's food for thought. You may have seen me in other videos mention Punter Sports. This person basically has done a lot of work at statispro, creating his own cards and his own ratings. And I've learned a lot and used a lot of his ratings in my own sim spreadsheets. But he has this formula for statispro, which creates a denominator, which is running opportunity factor, hits plus walks minus home runs minus triples. So, I think he removes home runs for obvious reasons because there's no running involved there to speak of. And I think he removes triples as well because basically there's no stolen base opportunities or advancement opportunities other than to home. The numerator is triples plus stolen bases plus runs minus home runs. And so that's pretty logical. And as I said before, here's a running rating that has a stolen base factor in it. You take that numerator divided by the opportunity factor from above, and then to get a rating on the statispro scale, he multiplies it by 5.5. What I've found is, for any given sim, you can scale this metric and get a pretty reasonable running rating. And this is my fallback rating in my sim spreadsheets if I'm not using the strat rating and converting that. I think I've already said that. And I've got a thing at the bottom that doesn't relate to this page. It relates to a later page. Okay, so using that same Punter formula, if you look at this graph, Ricky Henderson's running or strat rating is at the top, and the metric for Ricky Henderson is the orange line near the bottom, and you can see with the orange line his rating declines a little bit over time, although late in his season it bumps up just a little bit. I think clearly the number of stolen bases he has affects that metric, but then you can see it tails off at the very end, which is what happened to his strat rating. Starel's strat rating is in blue, and as I said, it started out higher, but it settled in at 8. And his Punter formula is lower than Henderson's, as you would expect. And there is some decline in the second half of this chart below 2. And so, there's some reasonable basis for using this formula as a basis for assigning running ratings. One thing it will do, I think, is address questions of relative accuracy. irrespective of maybe absolute accuracy. There's a couple other sources for running ratings. FanGraph has a BsR metric base running, and you can kind of just see the screenshot here. It has three components at the bottom. One is what they call weighted stolen base runs. One is called ultimate base running, and one is called weighted grounded into double play runs. And so I think the idea is you get credit if you steal bases, you get credit for general base running or advancement, and then you can get a deduction, I think, if you have a large number of double plays grounded into. That middle factor, ultimate base running, has a definition. Again, it's really based around advancement or lack of advancement on a relative scale. These formulas can get quite complex. I have not up to this point chosen to use any of the FanGraph metrics in assigning ratings to my sims, but it's something maybe for you to look into. Finally, there's something called the Bill James speed score, and it has 6 factors. It's going to look familiar, but there's stolen base percentage, there's success rate, there's stolen base attempts, there's triples, we've seen that before, runs scored excluding home runs, we've seen that before, grounded into double plays, we just saw that on the FanGraphs, and then he actually includes basically a defensive range factor in there as well, and he does a computation for each one of these. You add all 6 up, divide by 6, and then that's the speed rating. I've built this into some of my spreadsheets, but honestly, I don't have much of an opinion on it as to whether this is useful in terms of assigning a base running rating. When I've done it, I've excluded factor 6 altogether. But this kind of goes back to some of the things I said at the beginning about, what's the best way to measure base running ability or base running speed for a sim. So I didn't want to go much deeper into this. It's more to prompt thought and comment. Thanks for listening, as always. And again, email me if you want access to the drive that has all these PowerPoint presentations in it. Thanks. Bye.